I think we need to do three things, essentially. The first thing is we need a real sense of urgency. We've been talking about this long enough. We can't discuss much longer what we're going to do next year, the year after. We need to get going right now. The second thing is we need to engage with everyone in the city. Residents, businesses, third sector, public sector. We need everyone on board, all the talent, and we need everyone engaged. The third thing is we need a really credible, practical plan of action where we can look at where we are, where we need to be, and in what time scale, and then map out from now to then what we're going to achieve each year, what we're going to achieve each month, and then review it every period and make sure that we're actually doing it.
We need some leadership from a local authority, which I believe is kind of is happening. So I know the economic development strategy for the city and the Greater Brighton area is going to be very much aligned with circular economy model coming up, and that's essential really, because we need leaders, both thought leaders, but you know, our governments, our local authorities and public bodies kind of have a responsibility to all citizens in their area. And yeah, we do need guidance. So it's easy for someone like me to kind of reduce my carbon or make changes and everything, but it's not so easy for other people. And there's also a lot of people that aren't motivated to do that. So we need a system change so that just the normal things that people do every day are actually better for the planet. And for that to happen, yeah, you know, you need government, you need strategy, and you need infrastructure that's fit for purpose.
Well, I think the citizens and politicians and people of Brighton and Hove City have always been quite ambitious to do the right thing with the environment in mind. I think we just always found it really difficult to implement it. From my point of view, the message is simple. We've got to really look at reducing the consumption of stuff on a day-to-day basis. So there's a lot of people are preoccupied with reducing carbon emissions, but it's literally the consumption of stuff, whether that's water, energy, or the resources for making a building or a road, less road miles travelling by car or air or whatever. That is the big deal. Our insatiable appetite for stuff.
Every area where we need to transition to net zero, the council should have a strategy. They should have a comprehensive strategy for that. And that way, once you have a strategy, it's just a process of implementation. So we could, together, the people living in this community or in the surrounding areas, people with the knowledge and skills, can actually do the work to achieve the net zero target. It's definitely achievable. We just need to make the effort to do it.
Actually learning from others, I think, is the start point. What are the leading cities around the world doing? So looking at Scandinavian cities potentially. And yeah, looking at best practice, which is what we learned from the solar industry in Germany in, I guess, the last decade or so. Looking for financing solutions. How are we going to massively transform the infrastructure in the city? You know, food, energy, water waste, actually ironically all the aspects of one planet living that we used to talk about. And I think we've all got to be willing to make significant changes ourselves, which doesn't actually have to be a sort of negative restricting our lifestyles, but embracing, you know, eating less meat, travelling less indulgent flying.
I'd like to see a big convergence of all the people doing great work on sustainability. So we have good work going on in the city in sustainable food and farming, as we are, in green energy, in green transport, and in other areas. And I'd like to see this converge and become written into public policy, some of the great work that we're doing.
If everybody on planet Earth lived like we do in Brighton, consumed what we do on a day-to-day basis, we would need 3 to 4 planet Earths of stuff every year. I mean, at the moment, the UK reaches its overshoot day in mid-May. That means everything after midday we're stealing from the future. After mid-May we're stealing from the future.
I think probably the first thing is to put energy efficiency at the top of the agenda. It's not a very sexy subject, but people have been talking about new renewables and new technologies, but actually the best energy we use is the stuff we save. So if you're not using energy, it doesn't cost you anything and you're not creating carbon in the first place, rather than trying to offset it with something else. So I think if there was a focus from the local authority and the greater powers that be around Brighton and Hove, then we could really make a dent in the energy output and carbon footprint of the city.
We also have 11 million visitors to the city, so that's another reason why the local authority really has to be one of the biggest leaders on this. I think there's a massive appetite in the council that they understand their role and that they have to implement things. So I mean, there's all the obvious stuff we need to do, which is decarbonising our energy. So thank God for BHESCo and other such organisations that are encouraging solar and all sorts of alternatives to fossil fuel.
The important thing is the diversity of practices, I think, the diversity of activities, and I think a positive promotion of the value of community and positive action.
I would really like to see community energy supported a lot more than it is now. It's clearly a trusted vehicle for the implementation of local clean energy systems. And at BHESCo we also do energy efficiency, which is as, or if not more important than the generation. It's equally as important, but the point is that we really do need to support community energy, because what a beautiful model of creating equity in society, where we have locally generated, clean, community-owned energy systems.
I think there's been quite a lot actually happened quite recently, which has been moving things in the right direction. But we do really need to wean transport in the city off fossil fuels completely. We obviously also need to address the air quality issue the city has. It's really bad in the city centre, and we're, despite lots of practical action that we've been trying to take over the last couple of years, it's still really bad. So we need to address that, but address more than ever where our fuel is coming from. So just wean ourselves off diesel and petrol and all combustion engines.
Transport, like honestly, we've got to get people out of their cars for pointless journeys, and it might seem like a little thing, but it's not. 70% of all car journeys in this city are individuals in a car going less than 3 miles. All those journeys, unless you're carrying filing cabinets or something like me, all those journeys could easily be done on foot, on a bike, share car, on a bus, on a train.
Transformation from ICE, so internal combustion engines, to electric vehicles, I think that journey is happening and we're not going back. It seems that the major car manufacturers are all investing and moving away from internal combustion engines. I just read West Sussex has got a really good EV strategy that they published a couple of months ago, and it was something like there's 80 publicly accessible EV charge points in West Sussex today, and there will be something like 3,000 in 5 years' time. The number of EVs they project is going from about 1,000 to 100,000 in the next 5 to 10 years. So I think that journey is happening. And I think there's a great opportunity for the solar industry, which is what we're doing a next generation innovation project on, is linking EV charge points and solar PV, because clearly if the electricity from the EV charge points is still from fossil fuels, then it isn't solving much of the problem. It's sort of dissipating or displacing where the carbon emissions are coming from. So if there's local generation, and clearly we all know that you don't generate electricity from PV at night or in the middle of the winter, but sunny day like today, even though it's March, there's quite a lot of electricity generated. But if you have on-site renewables at car parks, small business premises, cinemas, all sorts of places where people might charge, workplaces, combined with the EV charging, then there's it's a good way of actually reducing the carbon emissions from the charging. So I'm really hopeful that there's, the EV journey is, that one, it's not sailed, but it's happening. But there is a business opportunity for community energy in linking electric vehicle charging and renewables.
Again, it's to do with the consumption of resources. Basically, half the mined and harvested raw materials that we get every year off planet Earth are consumed by the construction industry. 45% of carbon emissions are from the built environment, the design, the construction, the maintenance, the occupation and deconstruction of buildings. Consume basically half the raw materials and create half the carbon footprint. In the UK, the construction industry is responsible for 60% of the waste going to landfill and incineration. That's 120 million tonnes of stuff a year. So in the construction industry, we've got to learn to rework existing situations, existing buildings, adapt existing situations, existing buildings. And we've also, when we're building new buildings, we've got to make sure that they're designed in a way that they are material stores for the future. This phone I've got is a fair phone. It comes with a screwdriver. That is a completely different sensibility to all other smartphones. If a bit of this phone breaks, I can unscrew it, send it back to the supplier who want the material as a resource, and they would give me a replacement. So that's what we need to do with our buildings. They need to be demountable so that one day, if they're in the way of something or they're not working, they're not thrown away, they are a resource for new buildings. And by having that point of view, designing buildings as material banks for the future, we will reduce the amount of new raw materials we need. And we've got to do that big time.
Well, what's great about food is that everyone eats it, and everybody can help shape the future of food and farming by what they put in their shopping baskets and on their dinner plates. So our work is all about nudging people towards more sustainable shopping behaviour, and everybody can buy more local food, buy more packaging-free stuff, pick up sustainable shopping options, and just shop more consciously.
Quite often one of the things that we identify through research is that the changes that we need to make are really quite fundamental to the nature of our cultures and our society. So things like decolonising the curriculum, so shifting the curriculum away from something that is based on the modernist, capitalist values that have kind of led to the situation that we're in, to include underrepresented groups, indigenous groups, people who maybe don't have such easy access to education, who are the people who are oppressed and underrepresented. How can we get them into education, or how do we get those people into education so that we can really enable people to take control of their own situation and start to kind of become the change that they want to see.
We were talking about all of this 10, 15 years ago, and it all kind of fizzled out with the financial crisis and then austerity. And the problem is that construction work takes time and it takes effort to put into it, and things take sometimes several years to implement. And I think that the local authority and the greater area around Brighton and Sussex need to focus on the energy efficiency of their housing stock, of their residential landlord sector, their student housing stock, and of course the able to pay market as well as the unable to pay. So I think if we could promote energy efficiency across all of that stock, we'd make a big dent in the 30% of emissions that come from domestic households.
The Big Lemon has a vision that by 2030 every community in the country will have zero emission buses powered by renewable energy and owned by the local community. And I do think that community ownership is really important, because that's how people get really engaged in the provision of their local transport, and they get engaged in how it runs, who runs it, where it goes to, at what frequency, what the fares are, and so on and so forth. So we really need public services, community owned, zero emissions, run by renewables for the benefit of those communities. And I think if we can do that in Brighton, then we can do that anywhere.
Well, my mantra is basically there's no such thing as waste, just stuff in the wrong place. So I look at waste as a resource, and literally we all need to do that. I mean, I've been thinking like that for decades, but everybody needs to look at stuff as a resource and not be really random with what they do with things at the end of life or when they don't want them anymore.
So I would say the biggest difference you can make is buy local food, buy stuff grown and made on our doorstep. There's a lot of it. Over 60% of the fresh food in the shop is from local farms. Buy stuff loose. Bring your Tupperwares that are sitting at home and all your containers. These containers are going to outlive us all. They're made of plastic. So bring them along, fill them up, take them to local cafes, take them to local shops, and buy stuff loose. It'll make a huge impact.
People need to think about the carbon footprint, their own carbon footprint in their everyday lives. So if you're not on 100% renewable energy, that's demonstrable 100% renewable generated energy, then you need to switch. And I would recommend our community energy tariff with Octopus and Co-op Energy. If you are on 100% renewable already, I would think about my carbon footprint from my house, from my transport, from every aspect of my life, including plastics and things that I use in my everyday life, my fast fashion and everything, and put that together and really examine how I'm living my life, how that relates to nature, and how I'm contributing personally to some of the problems that we have, and how I can do my bit to alleviate them. That's all we can do, is take individual responsibility and hope for the best.
I think probably go and get a home energy report. They say if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And if you don't know what your house is already producing in terms of its carbon footprint or what some of the solutions could be, then you've no idea really what road you could go down. I know that Warmer Sussex are currently offering subsidised home energy reports for people, I think that's a very good starting point if you own a house or have a landlord like you'd like to encourage to make improvements to your house. That's a very good start, and anyone could do it tomorrow.
There's so many really, really exciting projects in this city, and I think the one thing that I'd urge everyone to go home with is to find out what's going on, what really great projects there are, and obviously whichever one looks most exciting to you, get involved in it. Invest your money in it if you've got any. Invest your time in it if you've got any.
The only reason we have so much waste and that we need to focus on recycling is because people consume and procure all this stuff into their life. So, wake up call, people. How you spend your money will actually evolve our future. So don't spend money on bad products that are cheap, that are badly made, that aren't designed to be repaired, that aren't recyclable, that aren't reusable. Just stop consuming them. Don't let them enter your life. Then you won't have a problem to deal with. So there's lots we can do, and luckily there's lots and lots and lots of organisations in our city that provide all sorts of various services so people can be more resourceful and less wasteful. And I would just say embrace that as much as you can.
I would say familiarise yourself with the complexities and the opportunities within sustainable development. They're vast, they're broad, they're complicated and sometimes intimidating because of that. However, as you start to familiarise yourself with those complexities, you can start to develop a personal position and a personal set of priorities, and then a series of strategies to start to act on those priorities and really make a difference that you believe in.
My suggestion is being curious, researching, finding out for yourself and seeing what you can do in your life. And there are loads of guidance and books around in terms of reducing your carbon footprint from a food perspective, from travel, from energy usage, etc. But be curious and think of fun solutions, how you can engage the family, how you can engage the community, because there's a lot of social isolation going on, but coming together like we do in the community energy sector to create something from the greater good, there's a whole social aspect to it as well. So the one thing is be curious and research and find out.
If you've got a smart meter at home, get one. I mean, if you really are looking at the consumption of energy, if you get a smart meter, you get a reader, and you can just see when you turn the kettle on what sort of energy you're using. That does affect behaviour change, but with that sort of thing in mind, I think there's a lot of negative press at the moment. The bad news is the headline news every day. I wrote a book called The Reuse Atlas, and I interviewed 60 people doing amazing things around the world in the design and built environment industries. And that made me feel really positive, because you can see that there are a lot of good things happening.
So an important part of what we do is keeping money in the local economy. When you spend £1 at one of the big supermarkets, they keep only 5p in the local economy, and they export and centralise profit. So we turn that model on its head. When you spend £1 at HESCo, we keep 58p in the local economy by spending it on local suppliers, local services, and on staff wages. And that has a knock-on effect for the entire city's economy.
Shop at an ethical supermarket. Use sustainable public transport. Go and volunteer for an energy co-op. Whatever it is, whatever floats your boat, do it.
So, I mean, the obvious thing I'm going to say is join Freegal, which is an online reuse network. So if you have something that you don't want anymore, you can list it onto Freegal, and that will connect you to over 35,000 people in the city. So about 10% of the population in the city are on Freegal. So if you wanted to get rid of, this jacket, a table, a chair, garden stuff, toys, whatever, you list it on there, and someone in your local area will want that item. They'll come and pick it up from you, ba-boom. You haven't thrown something away. It's not lying idle being useless, and it's gone to someone that actually needs it or can use it. It's such a simple thing. I mean, in 10 years of Freegal running, we've kept 50,000 tonnes of stuff in circulation around the UK, equivalent to £35 million worth of goods.
Maybe apply for an electric car charging point in front of your house, so that the council is under a bit more pressure to install these, and also install the local clean energy generation to power these charge points, because this is all going to be an issue coming forward.